What, you have a podcast?
Really?
Computer, show the historical documents.
It's just time for a theocratic monarchy. King Trump, for life. Let's go.
I said, no, Sean, I'm going to be a dictator. I said that.
Hello, friends and enemies, and welcome to another episode of Recovery from Politics Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Frame, and today is Thursday, June 20th, 2024. I am freshly showered and caffeinated and ready to go, and if you hear bangs in the background, that is not someone in my basement trying to get out. That is construction. They're building houses. I don't know. We want them to do that, right? Yes. Okay. So, I read two articles that really kind of pissed me off. We'll get into those. The first one I just want to talk about just real quick, it happened late yesterday, was Louisiana is the first state, and that should be emphasized because it's coming to a state near you, whether you want it to or not, but it is the first state to mandate that every public classroom from kindergarten all the way through college must present the Ten Commandments prominently. The Ten Commandments, you know, from the movie. In a normal world, we would all think this is going to get shut down by the courts almost immediately, right? It's just crazy. There is a clause in the Constitution that says specifically you can't elevate one religion over another. And the Ten Commandments is a specific religion, Judaism. So, and of course, Christians also follow them, although I've never really understood why, but they do. They follow the Old Testament, even though the New Testament supersedes the Old Testament, but whatever. They follow it, and of course, that they're the ones doing this. This is not Judaism pushing their crap in our classrooms. But in a normal world, you would just assume that a low federal court would be like, yeah, no, you can't do that. That's unconstitutional. Get that the fuck out of here. And that would be the end of it. The Supreme Court wouldn't even hear it. Like, that's the ideal scenario, is that the Supreme Court and higher circuits of appeals would just, asked and answered. This is done. You do not, you don't get to do this. Apparently, their loophole in Louisiana is that this is not paid for by the taxpayers. Right? This is by donation. Now, they'll get tons of donations because posters are cheap, and obviously there are people with way too much fucking money in this country who would rather push their religion onto everyone, and they somehow believe that putting the Ten Commandments in a classroom are going to make everyone, follow them? You know? Like, sorry, no. They are specifically religious. Like, it'd be one thing if it was just the thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not lie kind of a deal. Like the three big ones that I actually agree with and like, you know, don't lie, don't steal, don't kill. Makes sense. But the literal first one is about worshiping that God specifically and no other God before him. And I'm just like, okay, so this is inherently a religious thing. This isn't a moral code. Right? You could argue, again, thou shalt not kill, steal, lie, those ones. Okay, that's like a moral code. I mean, would I want it in a classroom? No, personally, I think morals and ethics should come from family and friends and mentors, and you learn and acquire new ones as you grow as a human being, and you meet new people, and you hear new stuff you've never heard before, and you educate yourself, and then hopefully by the time you're around 25, as you discover who you really are as a person, at least for men, I think 25 is about when you really know who you are at that point, right? You know that if there's a zombie movie, if you're going to be part of the group that even survives the initial outbreak, or you're going to be part of the group, you know, that if you get bit, are you going to hide it kind of a deal? Like, you know, you may not admit it, and that's fine. I don't want to out anybody who's going to, like, get bit by a zombie and then try to hide it from the group until a really inopportune moment. But, you know, you have a sense, like, I'm that guy, right? I'm that guy. I'm the guy, quite frankly, if I'm strapped to a chair and somebody wants information from me and they're going to torture me, chances are I'm just going to give it up. I'm not suited for that. I'm sorry. You can maybe, like, just the idea of pulling a fingernail out or some other things is like, yeah, no, I'm sorry. I'm not the guy you torture. Just like you obviously have me. I'm strapped to a chair. I'm going to talk, probably. Like, let's be honest here. Unless the stakes are supremely, insanely high, like where are your kids kind of a thing. And then it's like, I'll hold out for as long as I can. I love them, but I don't know. I've never been tortured before. So, that's important. But the point is like you gather these morals and ethics and codes, and you find one that works for you, and you go forward in your life, and you're like, okay, these are my red lines. These are the things I'm not willing to do anymore. And you know who you are, right? At least for men, I feel like I didn't really know myself till 25. And I was in the Navy for most of that time, right? Like my adult years from 18 to 25, I was in the United States Navy. I was a very confused young man, right? I had no idea the proper way to go through life or anything. So, I mean, you could argue if it was a moral document. Okay, again, I don't think classrooms should push that in that way. Like, morals and ethics in my class were always from discussion, critical thinking. We would read a book, and we would be like, hey, this character did this really horrible thing. What do you think? And then we'd talk about it and be like, well, some people thought it was justified, some people thought it was bullshit, and you move on. But that's how you taught people, the proper way to do things, right? And even our cartoons when we were kids, they always had a message, right? There was always it's a 20-minute cartoon about robots fighting dinosaurs, and there's an overarching message at the end. I mean, shit, G.I. Joe literally had a whole segment before the end credits trying to teach a moral message. So that's what I grew up with, was every show had that, everything about it. So I was always sitting there like, yes, the good guy with the gun is never going to shoot someone in the back or shoot them while they're asleep. That's the good guy in the movie. Every time the good guy in the movie doesn't do certain things, even if he does kill, different heroes for different folks, but even if the hero kills, you knew whether or not he was a good guy or a bad guy. Was the bad guy a threat to him? And if the bad guy was asleep or unarmed, the good guy didn't shoot him. So when I saw cops unloading on men running away from them who were unarmed, I was like, you're not the good guy. My moral code immediately woke up and alarmed very loudly that is not a good guy. And the person who should be in handcuffs is that police officer who did that. I don't care. Okay? Everybody gets into the hypothetical on, well, what if the guy was going to commit another crime? And I'm like, no. Because then you're in Minority Report territory, right? We have movies like this. Minority Report. What if you can predict the future? Is it okay to arrest people before they commit the crime? No. No, it's not. And if you watch that movie thinking that would be great, you're part of the problem. But anyway, this whole idea of the Ten Commandments in classrooms is abhorrent to me. If I lived in Louisiana, I would be calling up the school right now and saying, yeah, they're not coming in. I'm homeschooling. Screw you. That might be part of the problem or part of the plan. The right really loves, especially the Christian right, they really love homeschooling, specifically because they think there's not enough God in schools. So they want to homeschool to do that, to make sure their kids don't learn about evolution, global warming, and crap like that, to push a Christian agenda. This is very well known. And then, of course, they send them off specifically to Christian universities who specialize in taking homeschooled kids and continuing the process. I don't want my kids growing up with that. If my kids grow up and become hardcore righty conservatives, it's going to be because that's the path they chose. That's the path they were set on. Hopefully, if I did my job, they're educated and they're not just repeating talking points. They're actually critical thinkers, and they're like, no, Dad, I just disagree with you. Here's my evidence. Here's the books I read that made me think this. Here are the people I listened to. This is where I am now. And I can live with that. I'd be fine with that. As long as they had a reason. But if they're just, it's like anything. If your son came home all one day and was like, I'm changing religions, it's like, why? It's like, because this girl I really like, she's a different religion. It's like, no, that's not a good enough reason. It's not. It really isn't. Oh, no. Obviously, I'm against this. In a normal, rational world, a court would come in, immediately stop it, and the Supreme Court would be so obviously against it that they wouldn't even hear this case. But we don't live in that world. The Supreme Court right now is filled with Christian nationalists. At least 5 of the 6 conservatives are members of that. And yeah, if you go off their past rulings where every religious thing that has come up, even hypotheticals where the plaintiff had no standing, which really pisses me off. Even in the hypotheticals where somebody said, it's against my religion to do this. Have you been asked to do this? No, but it would be against my religion if I had. Technically, that should have never been heard at the Supreme Court. That should have been thrown out on its merits a long time ago because the plaintiff doesn't have standing. You have to actually show harm. You were asked to do something against your religious beliefs. Nobody asked her to, but whatever. This Supreme Court bends over backwards to allow tax dollars to go to Christian schools, to allow praying on football fields, even though, that wasn't the case. The Washington case where the coach wants to pray on the field, they completely ignored the facts of the case and just ruled like, no, it's totally cool. Like they have made up precedent and ignored facts and just forgotten about this thing called standing, which is literally the first thing any court deals with to push their agenda. So if you ask me, if this case, even if it gets thrown out and dismissed with prejudice all the way through the whole Circuit Court of Appeals and everything like that, if it gets to the Supreme Court, I am confident right now in projecting at least a 5-4 decision saying, no, it's totally cool because the taxpayers don't pay for it. Never mind the fact that the taxpayers pay for the school where those posters will be put up. They're going to ignore that. They're going to go ahead. They'll be like, no, it's cool because the state is not paying for it. And if the state doesn't pay for it, then that's not endorsement. And that's going to be their loophole going forward. Again, any other court, the Supreme Court wouldn't even hear this case. But that's America today. So that's the first thing I wanted to talk about, just to get it out of the way. It's ridiculous. Yeah, that one just really bugs me. But I want to rewind a bit to earlier this year. There was a Senate seat opened up by the passing away of Senator Dianne Feinstein earlier. And the governor of California did, I thought, an okay. He did an okay. He didn't want to get into it. So he picked someone to sit and remain in that seat until the next election cycle, which is this coming November. And he went ahead and picked somebody who was not going to run. He said he did not want an incumbent to have an unnecessary advantage over anybody else who wants in the Senate seat with a new election coming up. The people of California should speak. Blah. Okay. Here's a problem. California has a very fucked up way of choosing their senators, right? They have what's called a top 2 scenario. And they're also heavily Democratic. There are Republicans from California, that does happen. There are a few counties where, yeah, Republican can get in. But for the most part, Republicans have, no power in this state. So California has what's called a top 2 primary. This was their way of making sure to maintain that lock, because in a top 2 primary, what they do is there's an open primary. Republicans, Democrats, Independents, Socialists, Green Party, Communists, however the hell you want to do it, you run. And they have 1 day of voting for everybody in a big, huge pot. And whoever the top 2 people are who get the most votes, they go on to a general election just between each other. There is no third party. This was a way the Democrats went ahead and did this, and they also did it in Washington to make sure that parties like the Green Party, for example, which also is of the left, could not steal their votes and make sure that a Republican gets in the general. I guess the only good thing you could say about this, and this will be the only good thing I say about this process, is in a state like California, because there are so many Democrats, hypothetically, you could end up with 2 members of the same party competing for the general election. 2 Democrats, for example. And for me, that's the interesting part. I like watching those because those debates can be very interesting. Usually you have, your centerline, typical Democrat, friendly with all the, big money changers and everything. And then you usually have more center-left or left-ish, more of a firebrand, somebody who really gets animated and gets people up in arms. And the beauty of that system, if there is that, is then you get a real debate. right? The debate becomes between two Democrats. We already know, okay, they're both pro-women's choice. They're both anti-corporation to a degree. They're, you know, and you can see certain things. You can be like, okay, and they both want to make healthcare more available. Say hypothetically, the firebrand is more Medicare for all type, and the centerline guy's like, no, we need to, you know, incentivize insurance companies to make it cheaper. Whatever. But the point is that you have an argument, you have a real honest to God debate about issues. You know, you can push forward. Now, I like to throw in the example of Bernie Sanders versus Hillary Clinton, right? At the end in 2016, it was between Bernie and Hillary. And all Hillary had was to tell Bernie that his ideas were pie in the sky, never going to happen. She had no rebuttal. Meanwhile, Bernie Sanders got to sit there and talk about Medicare for all and socialism in general and everything else. And then, surprise, after that election, if you followed the polls, socialism became not a four-letter word anymore. It was, for a long time, it was the thing, you know, the right wing loves to call us. They don't really do that anymore. Instead, they're going the more Marxist communist, right? Those are still words that are more or less alien to anybody in America who doesn't know about them. But socialism, because of Bernie Sanders' run, has cooled. So they know better. They're like, well, we can't call somebody a socialist because Bernie's got ideas that are pretty popular, and if you call him a socialist, people are going to be like, wait, what's wrong with that? But communism's good. We can call them communists still. We can still call them Marxists because people still have trouble identifying what those terms mean. But in an ideal world, we would have gotten two candidates in California, Democrats, debating real issues. They're both on the same team, so they're not going to be mudslinging, right? They got to work together tomorrow. Either way, they're going to work. So no mudslinging, no automatic debate, because your typical Republican versus your typical Democrat right now in any debate is he wants to take away your right to choose. Well, he wants to murder babies up to the 50th trimester. It's bullshit, mudslinging, stupid shit. Like, if it's a typical Republican versus a Democrat, your average American doesn't have to think about who they're voting for. It's whoever they went into the booth with a thought behind, right? If you're already a Democrat, you already know. I'm not voting Republican. These guys are all batshit crazy. Same thing on the other side. If you're already a Republican, if you're MAGA, right? You're not even going to consider a fucking Democrat. They're batshit. They are absolutely fucking crazy. You're never voting for them. They want to destroy America. Woohoo, go Trump, right? Like, that's where they are. But if you have two Democrats, then you're asking the voter to actually think, okay, what do I want? Republicans would be forced to choose between two Democrats. Okay, which one actually aligns more with my values? And Democrats would actually have to think, okay, I'm not voting a lesser evil here. I'm allowed to vote however I want. And regardless, even in a losing case like Bernie Sanders against Hillary Clinton, the conversation gets pushed forward. All of a sudden, socialism is no longer a four-letter word. All of a sudden, Medicare for all starts picking up steam and a few more percentage points, right? That's what we want. We want the pendulum to swing just a little the other direction, right? We know it takes a long time to convince people to change their minds. The first time you hear a new idea, it's alien to you, and you're like, no, that's fucking crazy. But then you keep hearing about it. Then people keep going on TV talking about it. Then you keep seeing articles written about it. You keep seeing social media people talk about it. And you're like, okay, this was crazy when I first heard about it. But maybe it's not so crazy anymore. And that's how ideas break into the mainstream. And that's what we want. Well, sadly in California, we had three prominent Democrats running for this. We had Katie Porter, whom I love, Adam Schiff, who I like, and Barbara Lee, who I think is fantastic. So, if you don't know, Barbara Lee is a constant reminder to Democrats that they totally dropped the fucking ball. So all the way back in 2001, Bush Jr., really wanted to authorize military use against terrorists worldwide. AUMF, I think it was, right? Crazy long, huge bill right after 9/11. And she was the only congressional member period, to vote against it. And she pointed out, she's like, this thing is overly broad. It doesn't define terrorism. It doesn't say we're going to go anywhere and get Al-Qaeda. It says we're going to go anywhere there's terrorism. She thought that was way too fucking broad. And there were also no rules as far as where the president could operate to kill this terrorism. Okay? Any sovereign nation with terrorism, technically the AUMF authorizes military force if we find terrorists, and that's subjective. If we find terrorists in France, the President of the United States has the authorization right now to drone strike the fuck out of them. And we don't have to tell France that we're doing that. We obviously would because they're an important ally and NATO member and all that, but that's the authorization the president has. And she says that's too much. She wanted it to be more regional. She wanted terrorists to be like actually fucking defined, not just whatever the Department of Justice or the executive branch says is a terrorist. Right? And to me, those sounded reasonable even back then, but she was the only one who voted against it. So the Democratic Party absolutely fucking hates her for that reason, because she's a constant reminder walking up and down those halls every day, looking every other Democrat in the eye saying, I'm the only one who fucking got it right. And all you motherfuckers just went along because, whatever, you didn't think. So I knew she was never, ever going to be the senator of California. I just knew. I was like, no, there's no way the Democrats are going to let her fucking win. She's not it. Now, the only reason I was against her, because I love her foreign policy. If you look at her votes throughout the years, she's pretty much perfect on foreign policy as far as votes are concerned. I don't know how she would craft foreign policy if she was given the opportunity, but when it comes to votes for use of military force and things on foreign policy, she's been the bee's knees. She's great. I totally agree with her across the board. But she's also very old, extremely. She was born in the 40s. I think it was late 40s, but she was born in the 40s. She's been around for a while. And I wasn't really keen on going from one really, really old person, Feinstein, to another. And that's not a knock on old. That's actually for political reasons. I don't, I want stability. I want somebody who's going to be there for a while. Like, if you could guarantee me she's going to be there for the next 20 years and retain her faculties, of course, and be the champion that I know she is, absolutely 100%. I would have no problem with her being senator. I still wouldn't. If she was the one on the top of this ticket, no problem at all. Okay, then we had Katie Porter. Katie Porter is famous for coming in and basically making CEOs sweat. A lot of her hearings she's had are great, fantastic viral material if you want to see them. But she basically comes in and destroys rich people for a living, and it's great. And so I loved her for this. I was like, hell yes. She's much more left-leaning than the other Democrats in here, at least for local matters, domestic matters. Again, I don't really know her foreign policy chops. Is she on the same level as Barbara Lee or not? Don't know. But I do know that when it comes to issues that actually matter to everyday Americans domestically, she's fantastic, and I would love her to be in there. So she was always my favorite to get this seat. But then you had Adam Schiff. I wasn't initially against Schiff for Senate. He became famous recently with the Trump impeachments. He was the guy in the House, really, like, he was put in charge of that, and he does that. Personally, he can be a little foot and mouth. He can go overboard every now and then, but I was like, I'm not against that for Senate, sure. And potentially, we could have a Trump presidency coming up soon, and him in the Senate gives him a little more oomph, and sure, I can see the appeal. Why not? However, there are two things that are important to know about Schiff. First, he is considered a protege of Nancy Pelosi. You all know how I feel about her. But the second thing is, he's just as underhanded as her, because since California is a top 2 state, the initial polls, his internal polls showed him that if nothing changes, it's going to be him versus Katie Porter. Okay, fine. But then it showed that in a general election, Katie Porter is about to mop the floor with him. He can't compete with her. She's a woman. She's smart. She's way more anti-corporate than he is. The voters are really anti-corporate right now, in case anybody, like anyone from the Democratic fucking Party wants to listen to me about this. It's the corporations, you idiots. But she's going to destroy him in a general election. So Adam Schiff, because he's Nancy Pelosi's protege and a DNC darling, they went ahead and helped him fundraise, so he had more money than her. Well, pardon me while I turn the page here. There was a Republican running, and his name is Steve Garvey. We'll get into him in a minute. But Steve Garvey wasn't doing too hot. He was coming in third behind Katie Porter. Katie Porter and him were close, but still, he was going to lose. He wasn't supposed to make it to the general election. So Adam Schiff spent 10 times more money than Steve Garvey had even raised on promoting Steve Garvey. He made pro-Republican campaign ads for his future rival to prop him up so that it would be Schiff versus Garvey, because any Democrat in California versus any Republican is going to win. It doesn't matter who the Democrat is. If there's a Democrat on the ticket running for Senate in California and there's a Republican against them, the Democrat's going to win, and it's not even going to be close. It's going to be a blowout. Schiff knew this. Hey, if it's me versus Garvey, if it's any of us versus Garvey, this is a cakewalk. So he spent so much fucking money to promote him, and it worked. Steve Garvey is going to be going up against Adam Schiff in the California Senate here in 2024. It would be karma if this backfired and somehow Garvey won. I don't think that's about to happen, especially in a presidential year with Trump on the ticket. California is going to go heavy blue. Heavy. But it pissed me off. It was like, dude, you would rather... I mean, this thing is batshit, right? He had an opportunity to push the debate in a direction that favors Democrats, to give Democrats and Republicans like a real choice. It would force Republicans to actually listen to what the Democrats are saying and take that into consideration before they vote. Yeah, a lot of them would stay home. They'd be like, there's no Republicans on the ticket, fuck it. Yes, that's true. But some of them would have to sit there and be like, well, it's my duty to vote, so I'm going to vote, and I guess I might as well be educated about it. And they would have been forced to listen to Katie Porter, Adam Schiff, both Democrats, both with reasonable-ish ideas. And it would have forced them to come and to reckon with that. But instead, Schiff decided, fuck that noise. This is going to be a real easy victory for me. We're going to tank Porter. We're going to get Garvey in here. And this is going to be a very easy debate for him. He doesn't even need to prep. Okay, Schiff is very good off the cuff. He's not even... I mean, seriously, if he preps for his debate, I would be surprised. Garvey is a first-time politician. He's a former baseball player, for fuck's sake. Okay? And he's Republican, so we can already paint the wall with all the issues we know he's going to be in favor of and all the ones he's going to be against. This is going to be a mudslinging, he wants to take away your right to choose versus, well, he wants, abortions through the 50th trimester. And we already know this because he's pushing bullshit already. Steve Garvey has been charged. Well, first off, historically, in the early 2000s, he had a company that went ahead and has been charged by the Federal Trade Commission for false advertising on weight loss supplements, which we know is like akin to boner pills on the right wing. So he does that. But since then, he thinks all the students protesting the war in Gaza are terrorists. He used that word, terrorists, and should be treated as such. He's definitely pro stand for the flag kind of a deal, doesn't care about the issues. So if there was a flag amendment that went through Congress, you could guarantee he would vote for it. He is pro police. So you're never going to get him to do any kind of police reform or say do a national, body cam law like that. That's just not happening with him. And he's already pushing lies that are easily debunkable. For example, he says that Adam Schiff and the Democrats want to make minimum wage $50 an hour. 50. I've never heard 50 by even the most, crazy fucking leftists in this country. $50 an hour is much. But he's going ahead and pushing it. And it's like, that's easily debunkable. Easily. But he's pushing it out there as like, that's what the Democrats want. Also, there's out of control crime. No, there's not. There's out of control homelessness. Honestly, I don't know enough about California. But, he's offering no solutions whatsoever. This is something very easy for Schiff to go ahead and just debunk and destroy across the board. So, the reason I bring that up is because the actual story that I read that pissed me off this week, because that all happened months ago, to be honest. The thing that pissed me off was The Hill is reporting that the Democrats, that the White House interfered with one of Katie Porter's bills. Katie Porter decided to do a bipartisan White House ethics bill with Representative Comer. He's the country bumpkin, usually next to Jim Jordan, trying to go after Hunter Biden and everybody. He's a bad faith actor across the board. But Katie Porter was there. And not only that, Katie Porter had 3 Democratic co-signers of this legislation. One of them was Ro Khanna. The other 2 I've never heard of, so we're not going to get into them too much. But anyway, all of a sudden, one day, she goes to bed. She wakes up the next morning and all 3 of her co-signers are gone. They don't exist. Poof. All 3 of them magically say to The Hill, oh no, I came to this decision all on my own at the exact same time as the other 2 people. It just happened that way. And all of them are saying the same thing. Well, the language in the bill was not that great, and yeah. Katie Porter goes on the record and says, yeah, the White House fucking called him and told him not to support this bill. Okay. Then, to top it off, Comer and Katie Porter had it scheduled, and these dates aren't accurate, but, hypothetically, they announced, we are going to announce our new bipartisan legislation for White House ethics reform Thursday morning at 8 a.m. Cool. Wednesday night at 9 p.m., fucking Jamie Raskin, of all people, introduces his own version of the bill that's dead on arrival for Republicans. He, preempted their announcement with his own bullshit. Now, that sounds to me an awful lot like DNC coordinating an attack against them. The Democrats are eating their own because they need to defend Biden at all costs. So it got me wondering, okay, this thing had Ro Khanna and Katie Porter, 2 Congress people I more or less respect, signing on to it, and it's about White House oversight. What the fuck is in the bill? Okay. So it would require the President of the United States and the Vice President to disclose any foreign income earned by themselves or relatives while in office. I don't think that's a bad thing, do you? Seriously, one of my main things that I've got with this is, if this were 5 years ago and Trump were in office and we had this on the books, that would have been fucking amazing. We would have loved that for Trump, right? Yeah, fucking disclose anytime you get income from a foreign government. Fuck you. It requires, once elected, to share your tax returns and to disclose any conflicts of interest. Again, if this was under Trump, fuck yeah, that asshole still hasn't, sent out his tax returns. I would love a rule that says he's required to Congress. And obviously if it goes to Congress, yeah, it'll get leaked, but who gives a fuck? This is the president, we need to know. And again, also consider the other side would also see. It's not like the Democrats could just hide Biden's tax returns from the Republicans. The Republicans own the House right now. And similarly, the Republicans wouldn't be able to hide the tax returns from the Democrats. So again, this is a good thing I'm hearing. It requires disclosure of any loan to family members. Again, if this were Trump, I would be over the moon about it. Fuck yes. I want to know when Trump loans Eric or Don or Ivanka or, Kushner, any of them. I want to know when they do that. I don't see a bad thing about this. It requires documenting when immediate relatives join the president on Air Force One, including their purpose, right? Again, under Trump, yes, this is good. I want to know why Eric is on that fucking plane. What's he doing going to Ukraine? Or what's he doing going to Saudi Arabia? What are they doing over there? Are they just following their dad along? Because this also has a provision that says they have to write their purpose. Did you go there because, oh, hey, Dad, I just happened to have a business meeting the same time as your summit over there in Saudi Arabia, and I'm going to go across the street while you do your thing and have a completely, totally unrelated, this is the beginning of investigations. I don't see a problem with any of these. At all. These requirements are all fantastic. I would have loved to have all of these under Trump. But the Democrats are scared shitless. Oh no, what about Biden? And quite frankly, this is again me. I don't give a fuck because I also want these there for Biden. Now I know Hunter is on the outs and he's probably going to prison. That's great. But you know what? I still want to know if President Biden is getting any foreign money from foreign governments. That's still something we should know. Any president. We should know that. We should know when their immediate family is traveling with them and what the fuck they're doing there. Most of the time, it's going to be innocuous. Most of the time, it's going to be completely, absolutely boring. Well, I had a young kid, and I figured, hey, I wanted to show him Paris. Sure, that's a perk of the job. Personally, I don't mind it. But, we should still know, because consider both Trump and Biden don't really have kids. They have adults. And that's a bit different. It's that whole don't attack the kids bullshit. When they're under 18, sure, but once they're over 18 and they start doing and saying shitty things or, being kind of weird, we should investigate them. We should. Sorry, your dad's the president. That's the deal he signed up for. He would rather have your life under a microscope than not be president of the United States. I personally don't give a fuck. So none of this stuff sounded crazy to me, so I'm like, why the fuck would the Democrats go against it? And of course, it's because they think the Republicans who control the House would misuse it in some way. And I'm like, but here's the key. Here's the difference between this bill and Jamie Raskin. Now, Jamie Raskin's and there's obviously some differences between the bill, but the main one, the reason that Raskin's is a non-starter with the Republicans, because again, Republicans control the House. If you want this bill to pass, you're going to need bipartisan support in the House before it goes to the Senate. And especially you're going to need Democratic support, otherwise Chuck Schumer's never even going to bring it the fuck up. But the main difference between Raskin's and Porter's bill is that Raskin's has penalties. So if the president does not disclose foreign income, there will be a penalty of some kind. Either hearings will be made, subpoenas, or maybe automatic impeachment. I don't really know. They didn't publicize exactly what the fuck is in Raskin's. They just says that his is more about penalty rather than disclosure. That's obviously a non-starter for Republicans. Republicans are sitting here, and if you believe the polls and you've been watching this thing, and at worst case scenario, you got a 50-50 chance at the presidency coming up, and the last thing you want is to give Democrats the ability to penalize the president on day one. I mean, let's be honest here, Trump's a big fucking liar. He's going to lie about this shit. And they're not going to do that to their guy. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying that he purposefully put a poison pill into a bill and then preempted theirs so that it would just shut everything down. So now GOP is obviously not going to vote for Raskin. Dems have abandoned Porter on her bill, so it's not really the bipartisan thing that they think it is. Because let's be honest, if this thing passed with 100% Republican support plus Katie Porter, Chuck Schumer could easily look at it and be like, that's not really bipartisan. You're full of shit. And not even bring it up for a fucking vote, because that's how the Senate works, and it drives me crazy. But again, this whole thing is these are still good things that I would love to have under a Trump presidency. Under any president. I want it under this president. I don't give a fuck. Like, seriously, if you're innocent, what do you have to hide? I mean, yeah, that whole thing is stupid. The fact that Democrats are doing it, this is a story, it's probably not going to get much play, which is why I wanted to bring it up, because I'm like, this is clear-cut evidence of Democrats and possibly the White House interfering in bullshit because they're worried about it somehow. And again, there's no punitive measures. What the fuck? What the fuck? Like, I know Comer's not on the up and up, but for fuck's sake, this would be fantastic to have if you're a regular Democrat and there's a Republican president. You would love to have this. Or, at worst case, if it is Trump, you would love to be able to hammer him every day in the media. He's supposed to fucking tell us this shit. And he's not. Like, why would you give that up? Because they just want to protect Biden. Because Democrats strangely think they're going to win this thing easily. And the last thing they want is Republicans to have a bullet against them in case, Biden loses another midterm or whatever. Crazy. Okay, so that was a long two stories thing about Democrats basically being assholes. What do I have next? Another thing about Democrats being assholes. In Axios, the top Democrats in the White House are saying Biden has a losing strategy. Okay. Before we get into this, imagine it's June 2020. Trump is still president, and you hear this headline, quote, "People close to the president told Axios they worry about raising concerns in meetings because a group of longtime loyal aides can exile dissenters." Or, instead, you see this headline, "Even for those close to the center, there is a hesitance to raise skepticism or doubt about the current path for fear of being viewed as disloyal." Those headlines would fit perfectly under the Trump presidency. Both of them. Everything we know about Trump is that he's all about loyalty, and he doesn't really like hearing anybody disagree with him. It's all groupthink. Everybody's on the same train. These headlines belong under a Trump presidency. Yet I am seeing them today with a Democratic President Biden. A lot of it is under the case when it comes to Israel-Gaza. There are a lot of people who are just like pulling their hair out, myself included, who are like, how are they still supporting Netanyahu? Why is Israel still getting blank checks? Why are they still getting bombs? Like, the evidence is clear. Netanyahu keeps bitch slapping you every time he has a microphone in front of him saying how much he hates Biden, and he hates the U.S. government, State Department for not allowing him to do whatever the fuck he wants. Like, every single time there's an olive branch put out by Biden, Netanyahu slaps it away. This is crazy to me. But these are the headlines we're seeing, is that technically nobody wants to say anything different. So they are on a path. They are not going to change course. This is one of the downsides with older people running. Once you get past a certain age, you're pretty much set in your ways and you're like, nope, full steam ahead. It becomes harder as you get older to challenge your own views, to turn around and say no. Also, you have the political angle of you don't want to be a flip-flopper, right? That's predictably or normally, under normal circumstances, would be a death knell, except if you're Trump, then you can change your mind on anything you want at any point. But Biden would be held accountable for being a flip-flopper. Now, personally, I would say, hey, guess what? The situation's changed. And then move on. But he can't. So they're on this track. The Axios report says they're on this track. They're going to keep going. Now, the report also shows that they have four key things that the Democrats, President Biden, is going to run on come November. And they believe this is the winning strategy against Donald Trump in 2024. Number one, and these were numbered, so number one, they're going to run on January 6th. They think January 6th is a definite win for them. They're going to make that the number one thing. Don't vote for Trump, you'll get another January 6th. Number two, political violence. Okay. Number 3, democracy. Democracy is on the fucking ballot this year. And number 4, Trump's character. Now, 2008 was a very formative year for me when it comes to presidential politics, and one thing I noticed was that you had McCain on one side saying, bomb Iran, Middle East war, good, we need to do more. And you had Obama on the other saying, holy shit, look at the economy and healthcare. And then when you looked at the polls, every time you asked, what do Americans care about? The economy and healthcare were always number 1 and number 2. And the wars were an afterthought. Yeah, the wars sucked, don't get me wrong. People cared about them, but they were not the number 1 or number 2 issue. They never were. Or they might have been. Earlier in the run, McCain basically got the nomination because at the time, the wars were the number 1 issue during the Republican primary. And he locked it up while the wars were still number 1 because it made sense to have a veteran of foreign wars to be president. Totally made sense. I get the decision. Yes, McCain, absolutely, 100%, totally. But after he locked up the nomination, pretty much, things changed. And all of a sudden, we had the wonderful 2008 financial crisis. Plunged us into a very, very deep recession. One that really fucked up a lot of people in this country. And Obama, I mean, he was already running on that, basically, right? Like, yeah, the wars were there, but his main thing was healthcare. So it was very easy for him to transition from healthcare to the economy. Not only that, McCain made a huge mistake during the primaries, and they said, what about this with the economy? And he's like, yeah, I'm not an expert on the economy, but don't worry, I'll hire the best. Okay, so you have one candidate who's basically always been running on the economy, more or less, and you have another guy who's admitted flat out, I don't know much about it, and then, boom, the economy becomes the number 1 issue. So the Republicans, in their infinite wisdom, aside from making, Palin the fucking running mate, which I think single-handedly torpedoed any possible outside chance McCain had of winning, they decided, we're going to run on McCain's strengths and ignore the polls. We are going to run on military intervention. You are the commander-in-chief. Rah. And we're going to ignore the economy entirely. Obviously, he lost in a historic election. That election handed the Democrats a supermajority, which they then squandered, but whatever. They had a supermajority. They had the largest landslide in modern American history. To a funny guy to a guy with a funny last name, right? It was amazing. So I saw this again in 2016. The big issues of the day: change. We want change. We don't like how things are going. We want something different. So the Democrats, in their infinite wisdom, elected somebody who basically represented the status quo. And the Republicans elected a change candidate, good or bad, but a change candidate. Somebody who is completely off the wall. He's going to do things differently. What the fuck? It worked for him with Reagan, right? So I'm sitting there like, this is doomed. I knew Donald could win easily. I never thought, I was never over the moon like some Democrats were. Oh, we got this in the bag. Nobody's ever going to vote for Trump. I'm like, yeah, you do not understand what's going on out here. They purposefully ignored it. They did. It was crazy. That's what I'm seeing right here. That is what I'm seeing right here. 2024. And I hope I'm wrong. But democracy is not going to be the number 1 thing people vote on going into that booth. It should be, in my opinion. In my opinion, democracy should be number 1 on their list, not January 6th and not political violence. We've had those in our history before. We'll get over them. Not January 6th, that was very specific, but political violence. This is nothing on the 60s and 70s. Okay? Seriously. We're fine. The number 1 issue on the ballot is democracy. I would be making Project 2025 my number 1 thing. Guys, you don't want it. But otherwise, they're not really running for anything. They're running against something. Biden's not running as though he's the incumbent who has to defend his record and tout his successes and tell people what he's going to do for them. Instead, he's strictly running against Trump. Right? Because let's be honest, what would they be running on if it was Nikki Haley? January 6th would not be brought up. Political violence would not be brought up. Democracy would not be brought up. Character would not be brought up. They would have a completely different list. This is a list specifically to run against Trump and no one else. The problem, you don't give down-ticket Dems anything to fucking work with. Okay, so I would not expect a blue wave. Even if Biden wins, I wouldn't expect the House to flip. I definitely don't expect the Senate to flip. Or I do expect it to flip to the Reds. Like I don't think the Dems are going to keep the Senate. I'm not 100% on how they're going to win the House back. This gives them nothing to work off of because, surprise, every Democrat in Congress is not running against Donald Trump. They have their own people that they need to run against. That's just how it is. But most importantly, none of these issues are number one. Every single poll done says that the economy and inflation are number one. Every single poll done, depending on the group, like if you go to Black Americans right now and the youth here in America, their number one issue is what the fuck is going on in Israel. And they're not happy with what Biden's doing. Their number one issue is that. I'm kind of surprised that none of these top four issues are the thing that Democrats have been screaming is their like golden goose that's going to guarantee them the presidency for the next generation, abortion. The Supreme Court, nothing on there. There's nothing on Supreme Court reform, which, okay, I get because Biden's against that because I don't really think he has a problem with what's going on right now. And there's nothing on abortion. If you ask women, their number one issue is women's rights. If you ask me, it's Supreme Court reform because I know without Supreme Court reform, nothing Biden wants to do is going to pass. Sorry. It's just not. It's not. They're going to strike down every fucking thing. January 6th could get completely blown up on them if today, because today is Thursday or next Thursday, the Supreme Court goes ahead and says January 6th was not an insurrection. All those motherfuckers go free. And, oh, by the way, they also still have and presidents and former presidents are not prosecutable except by impeachment in the Senate. If they go ahead and say that, man, January 6th doesn't fucking matter. That's your number one issue. It just got blown up by the Supreme Court. What the fuck are you going to talk about now? That is the dumbest fucking thing I've ever seen. Are these things important? Yes, absolutely. Are they the number one things most people care about? No, they're not. Because again, we're not talking about the informed voter. The informed voter knows democracy. They've heard about Project 2025. They know what's coming down the pipe. They know that this can get really bad really fast. They see the Louisiana bill and they see all these other bills and they see how the Supreme Court's been voting when it comes to religion in this country for a long time. Like, we all know the real danger. The people who are informed, we are talking about low information fucking voters. These are the motherfuckers who are going to watch next week's debate as if there's something new to learn. January 6th is not a thing for them. Political violence is not a thing for them. Democracy is not a thing for them. Trump's character is not a thing for them. Why? Because most of this shit is known. A low information voter, January 6th happened, it's done. A low information voter doesn't give a fuck. Make sure it doesn't happen again. That's it. Political violence. This is nothing. We haven't had reports of political violence in quite some time. There isn't any. There's the threat of it. Again, January 6th. Everything was peaceful up until January 6th, right? So there could be political violence, but you can't run on that. You can't make that like the number one thing you're going to talk about. Oh, if you don't vote for me, there will be political violence. There's an easy counter argument. Well, guess what? Maybe you win and there is political violence. Here's the real danger. What if the Democrats make political violence their number one issue? I mean, it's already their number two. So let's say Supreme Court throws out January 6th. Now their number one issue is political violence. I can easily make the case that if Biden wins, there will be political violence. Because guess what? There was the last time he won. They didn't storm the Capitol because Trump won. We don't do that. Probably should, given the stakes, but we won't do that. If Trump wins fair and square, no one will storm the Capitol. biggest argument for violence would be if Biden wins. So him running on that, I just think is a dumb. I think that's stupid, quite frankly. Your low information voter probably doesn't see democracy the same way you and I do. Your low information voter is like, yeah, okay, but we already live under democracy and this shit sucks. Right? Your low information voter is hurting right now. They were promised things would get better with Biden. For them, it has not. Their perception is their reality. Their perception is things fucking suck right now. There's a genocide going on in Gaza. We're a democracy. Fuck. Technically, Israel's a democracy. Still a genocide. The economy seems to be doing great for the wealthy, not so much for the poor. We're in a democracy. Like, seriously, what's the case for fucking democracy right now? You haven't done anything. You haven't affected any change. And again, I'm not talking about people like you and me, people who listen to podcasts like this and watch on YouTube. That's not the person we're talking. We're talking about the low information voter, the stupid fucking independent, the moron who needs to watch a debate to see if anything new's gonna happen. Those people do not see democracy the same way. They're the type of people that say, democracy's not working for us. And all Congress seems to do is get in the way. The president says he wants to do these things. I want the president to do those things, but it's always Congress in the way of that. What the fuck good is democracy? I voted for Biden. I voted for the Democrats. They had control for 2 years and did nothing. I don't see how you can sell it. Oh, if you don't vote for me, you'll lose democracy. Well, fuck, man, we voted for you. I've had democracy my whole life. What have you done for me lately? I don't see it as a guarantee. Horrible shit's still happening. You have to make a really, really fine point out. You have to reach the low information voter why democracy is worth keeping. And they're low information for a reason. They're low information because they don't have a stake in this. They already think, no matter who's in charge, I get fucked. So, what does it matter? And Trump's character? We already know. Like, for fuck's sake, Grab Him by the Pussy came out a few weeks before the fucking election in 2016, and this motherfucker still won. We know who he is. He equates Nazis with anti-protesters. This is who we know he's a racist. We know he's a misogynist. We know he's a rapist. We know he's a felon. I don't see how you run on that. It is a known. Even low information voters know he is a piece of shit. He still won and came within 45,000 votes across a few states of winning last time. He was not wrong when he said he got more votes than any sitting president in history. He did. And that's when we knew who he was. When he was in office making shit worse. He had 1 million Americans killed from COVID on his watch. Still almost won re-election. And Biden thinks running on his character is going to work? That ship has sailed. Anyone voting for Trump already knows. Democrats know who he is. Republicans know who he is. There's not an American in this country who doesn't know that Trump is the world's biggest piece of shit. We all know it. Why are you running on that? That is a given. And as the election moves forward, the more his speeches are going to get scrutinized, the more the debate pops up and you get to see it firsthand for those people who love debates. Like, the low information voter is going to be reminded about his character because Trump can't fucking help himself. Democrats should not be piling on this because they have other issues they could talk about. Trump's character is going to become apparent to anyone with ears all the time. He is going to make it impossible. You don't have to run on this. That is wasted air. That is time, minutes, hours of being on the air talking about something that is important to the people instead of reminding them what they already fucking know. So, yeah. That's my episode for today. A lot of what the fuck are the Democrats thinking and a really weird nod to Louisiana and the fucked up Supreme Court. we're going to be looking, probably at least one decision has already been handed down by the Supreme Court since I've been recording this, so we'll see what that's all about here in a few. That'll probably be what I'm talking about tomorrow, is whether or not the Supreme Court decides to destroy the Republic today. Yay! You know, so that's always good. Anyway, please don't forget, like, subscribe, leave comments, all that good stuff. It helps the algorithm. Helps me out too. If not, don't worry about it. We'll catch you next time. See you guys later.